This is undoubtedly the most controversial disaster thriller to date. Some consider it an unparalleled classic, while others utterly condemn it. The biggest point of contention lies in the film's simplistic and brutal premise. The slightest breeze will send everyone rushing to their deaths, an unsolvable problem. In Central Park, in early summer, tourists are happily playing and frolicking when a gentle breeze sweeps by, abruptly silencing the noise. The air seems to freeze, and people stand motionless. A girl on the street senses something is wrong and is about to warn her companion when she discovers that the other person. His eyes were vacant. Then he removed his hairpin and plunged it into his neck. People began to fall in droves, their blood quickly staining the park's lawn. At a nearby construction site, the foreman initially thought the king of workers was an accident, but the next moment, as if by prior agreement, the workers eagerly jumped from the high-rise building. The storm of death arrived silently, catching almost everyone off guard. Meanwhile, science teacher Nick was still diligently teaching when the principal called him to his office. Only then did he learn of the tragedy in Central Park. Everyone assumed it was a terrorist gas attack, and, for safety reasons, upon hearing the principal's decision to suspend classes and evacuate all teachers and students, Nick, a longtime friend, realized the gravity of the crisis and invited him to join him in seeking refuge in his rural hometown. Nick initially hesitated, but after returning home, he learned more details from the news. Officials suspected a new type of virus capable of blocking neurotransmission in the brain, but they knew nothing about its mechanisms or how it originated. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Nick finally accepted his colleague's invitation and decided to go with him to the countryside to avoid the crisis. He and his wife rushed to the station. Only Foss and his daughter were seen. Upon inquiry, it was learned that Foss's wife had missed the train due to traffic, and with the train about to depart, he had to ask her to take the next one. Shortly after the train started moving, another tragedy unfolded in a park. As a breeze blew, everyone stopped in their tracks. A policeman raised his gun and fired at himself. Then, as if sitting in a row, the others picked up their pistols one by one and ended their own lives. The passengers in the carriage quickly learned of the incident, and the already uneasy atmosphere became even more agitated. Foss tried to contact his wife, but the communication signal was intermittent. "What? I can't hear you," he thought, his mind clouded with frustration, oblivious to the passengers' incessant chatter. Just then, the train suddenly stopped. Everyone disembarked, bewildered. They learned from the conductor that the signal ahead had inexplicably failed, and the train could no longer proceed. Fortunately, they were near a small town. Nick and his family went to a restaurant for a meal. Through a customer's phone, he saw even more horrifying images. A zookeeper, like a puppet, allowed lions to tear him apart. Everyone was stunned. They had never experienced such a bizarre disaster. Then, an emergency notice arrived from the authorities, denying previous suspicions of a terrorist attack. The disaster had spread throughout the country, and the small town where Nick was staying was at its epicenter. A nameless fear permeated the air. Before everyone could recover from the shock, the restaurant lost power without warning. The crowd could no longer hold back and fled the restaurant in a frenzy. In this apocalyptic escape, most people were struggling to survive. Nick pleaded everywhere, but couldn't find any vehicles to leave the town until a kind couple agreed to take them in. The couple secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but their friend Fox had his own plans. His wife had been out of contact for 2 hours, and he was determined to find her no matter what. However, Fox didn't want to risk his daughter's safety, so he entrusted her to Nick and his wife. They smiled and agreed on a meeting place, but Nick knew in his heart that this parting might be their last. Sure enough, not long after Fox drove away, they entered a street littered with corpses. Countless dead bodies hung from the trees along the roadside. The passengers in the car screamed in terror, frantically sealing all the gaps, but they overlooked the scratches on the roof. Fox's eyes revealed ... A profound despair washed over them. The car abruptly stopped without warning, accompanied by a violent crash. Several passengers were thrown from the vehicle. Only Fox, stiff as a board, stepped out and picked up a shard of glass. Nick and the others fared no better. They saw numerous corpses lying at the intersection ahead, clearly indicating a viral attack there as well. They had no choice but to turn around and head towards another exit. At the fork in the road, they encountered a military vehicle. The soldier inside hurriedly warned them that the entire base ahead had committed suicide and they should never go that way. Before he could finish speaking, several more vehicles approached from the other direction. They too had experienced the virus outbreak. Nick finally realized that no matter which way he went, it seemed to be a dead end. He tried calling Fox, but no one answered. A sense of foreboding rose in Nick's heart. Just then, a mother was talking to her family in Princeton, the place Fox was searching for his wife. Nick hurriedly scraped together some money, but then he heard the sound of shattering glass on the other end of the line. He could hear the rustling of wind through the phone. Clearly, that city had also fallen. Nick sat by the roadside, speechless for a long time. He thought of his friend who had gone to find his wife. He guessed that the friend was probably dead too. A deep sense of unease filled his heart. With nowhere to vent his frustration, the only thing Nick could do was take care of Foss's daughter. After calming down, Nick began discussing their next move. They realized that a breeze seemed to blow each time an accident occurred, and the accident sites were all densely populated areas. Nick speculated that the virus might be a toxin released by plants, triggered by a large, gathered crowd. The soldier immediately ordered the survivors to split into two groups and try to reach a secluded place for refuge. However, just as they were passing through a plain, a breeze blew by, and the team ahead stopped abruptly. The soldier even screamed in despair. "My firearm is my ... double quotes friend," he said, then pulled out his sidearm. The gunshots rang out like hammer blows to everyone's hearts, instantly wiping out the entire squad. Nick muttered in disbelief. Could a dozen people together really trigger a plant virus? The remaining squad panicked. The man forced himself to calm down. He combined his understanding with natural science theories and deduced that the scent secreted by humans had stimulated the plants. If they ran upwind, they would be protected from the virus. Just then, a gust of wind blew in from a distance. He urged everyone to scatter and run. The Mayday wind seemed to, having developed eyes, they quickly darted past the survivors. At this point, running away was pointless. Nick and his wife closed their eyes and awaited their fate. When everything calmed down, they were surprised to find that they hadn't been infected. It seemed Nick's prediction was correct. The virus was indeed related to population density and wind direction. Because the group had scattered, besides Fox's daughter, two more young strangers were now with Nick and his wife. Nick hurried to the abandoned vehicle, wanting to get the latest information from the radio, but unexpectedly saw a farm not far away. Without hesitation, everyone ran towards it. Nick found a map on the bookshelf. He planned to seek refuge in a sparsely populated place devoid of vegetation. Casually draping a decorative green plant from the living room, Nick inexplicably recalled a magazine he'd read before. It mentioned scientists discovering ancient bacteria in the sea recently. Some fishermen who accidentally came into contact with them died mysteriously. Even stranger, bees had recently vanished without a trace. Nick wasn't sure if this was related to a plant virus, but he was certain of one thing. This dwelling was surrounded by vegetation, and lingering there might be disastrous. After a quick lunch, the group packed their belongings and continued their journey. However, just as they reached the halfway point up the hill, they saw two pairs of survivors heading towards the farm. Just as they were about to meet, they suddenly froze, clearly having exceeded the group limit and triggered the plant virus. The survivors began engaging in various suicidal acts. Nick and the others couldn't bear to watch any longer and quickly fled in the opposite direction. After walking for most of the day, the group was almost completely exhausted. They spotted a house in the distance, and Nick approached to ask if the owner could take them in. However, the residents, fearing infection, told Nick and his companions to leave immediately. The two young men in the group, unwilling to give up, angrily pounded on the doors and windows. The next moment, a long gun emerged from the crack in the door, and the boy by the door fell to the ground. While everyone was still stunned, the barrel of the large gun protruded from the window. Teasy and the little black boy by the window also became a corpse. The owner's hippo-like roar echoed from inside the house again. Nick, suppressing his grief, hurriedly fled with his wife and daughter. As darkness fell, they encountered another house. Nick decided to explore it. This time, he was lucky. The elderly woman who owned the house was very kind. She was alone and had spent most of the day preparing a sumptuous dinner for them. Nick and his wife were grateful, but they felt something was off about the old woman. She wouldn't touch things that aren't. After settling their daughter, Nick and his wife discussed their next plans. However, when they turned around, the old woman was standing at the door. Nick was speechless, thinking he'd better leave as soon as possible. The next morning, he woke up to find his wife and daughter gone. Puzzled, he went downstairs to look for them, only to find the old woman standing in the doorway. Curious, Nick pushed open the door and saw a strange doll lying on the bed. The next second, the old woman appeared behind him, angrily accusing Nick of being a thief. Nick realized that the old woman had probably lived alone for too long and was experiencing some mental problems. He quickly chased after her to explain, but found the old woman standing motionless. The leaves overhead were swirling wildly. Nick stared in disbelief, then quickly retreated into the cabin. Just as he closed the door, he heard a crashing sound outside. The old woman had clearly been infected by the plant virus, sensing the strange wind blowing into the hall. Nick retreated into the adjacent kitchen, sealing all the gaps with towels. He then faintly heard his wife's voice. Pushing open the wooden door to the next room, the sound became clearer. His wife was playing with their daughter in the storage shed in the yard. A hollow pipe connected the two sides, allowing him to hear their conversation. Nick showed no joy, for he realized the plants seemed to have evolved. Teamed, they could sense even the presence of a single person. The old woman's death was captured on camera. Nick couldn't imagine how humanity would cope with this natural disaster. Since death was inevitable anyway, all he wanted was to be by his wife's side. After saying this, Nick walked out of the house. Unexpectedly, his wife also opened the door and walked towards him. The two quickly met in the open space in the middle, with strong winds swirling around them. The couple held hands, waiting for death to come. However, more than 10 minutes passed, and they were still unharmed. It turned out that the strange disaster had automatically ended just as Nick stepped out the door. 3 months later, everything had returned to normal. Their daughter was staying with Nick and his wife. The television was broadcasting experts' predictions. This disaster was nature's response to humanity's destructive behavior. Serves as a warning. Like a red tide in the ocean, it comes suddenly and goes quickly. The scene shifts to a revitalized Central Park, where people are happily enjoying their leisure time. Almost without warning, everyone freezes in place. The terrifying plant virus has returned. Will it disappear on its own this time? That concludes the content of Cataclysm. This movie is definitely a representative work of Kyle. Dude, nightmares. Although it lacks extremely impactful visuals, the atmosphere of terror is created quite well. I believe many people were deeply impressed by this movie. Okay, that's all for today. Please continue to follow if you like it. See you next time.